it comes to bad media takes, I kind of feel like nowadays they're a pretty common thing. So much to the point to where I kind of feel like they're kind of at certain tiers when it comes to how bad they are. Because I kind of feel like when it comes to the internet, any idiot could sit down, make a pretty shitty statement on a piece of media, and proceed to go post it to the internet. But I kind of feel like there's a tier of them. Bad takes in general, and then bad takes just followed with just being completely unhinged. And that's going to be the subject of today's video. So the special individual which I'm going to be talking about today is a certain person by the name of A.S.K AIR. And if you're going to ask me about what I think about this video, I have to say, it's pretty ass. Get out! But jokes aside, I have to say, yeah, this video is just, like, objectively terrible. Because never before have I seen a video that tries so hard to be this deep critique into media, only for it to be so, like, surface level with its regurgitated takes. But never before have I seen a video that's so abhorrent with how dumb it is, with how it feels so poorly researched, with how it just has also blatant misinformation, along with the blatant racism, which we will get into later in this video. But enough of me yapping, let the big guy himself talk so you guys can get a sense of perspective of where I'm coming from.
The other day I had an epiphany. I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone as one does, and I came across this monstrosity, The Fairly Odd Parents reboot, and it was just as bad as I expected it to be.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Mindless drivel plot lines, flashy art style, and an overt unfaithfulness to the source material. And I realized, these phenomena are not unique to The Fairly Odd Parents. These symptoms carry on to many remakes and reboots that have sprouted from Hollywood in the last few years, whether it's animated or live action, movie or TV show. And if this were just a one-off thing in media, I probably wouldn't be making this video. But this is a repeated cancer that is spreading to more and more properties, and is only destructive in nature. And so I gotta take the mantle and expose just what makes these properties so inherently bad. Let's go.
So I'm gonna go ramble about the whole thing about sequels versus reboots later, but I just find it really funny how in the beginning of this video, how not even admit it, and how bro is just blatantly wrong about the video topic which he's based his entire video around. Like, how the hell are you going to go like, oh, I'm going to talk about the Fairly Odd Parents reboot, when it's been stated multiple times that the show is not a reboot, but a continuation. Also, notice the very subtle racism with how he claims that they ruined the show because of a new protagonist taking place of the main character. I'm just gonna leave that as food for thought for later, but of course, let me just continue with this video.
It was originally the Fairly Odd Parents trash reboot #1 that inspired me to make this video, but now they went and made another one. And when it's animated, that's where I draw the line. I'm old enough to remember back in Yale 2016 when everyone was trashing the new reboot at the time, Teen Titans Go. Then it was the Powerpuff Girls, Ben 10 reboot, Rise of TMNT, the list goes on.
You know, there's something which I find really funny about this video just before we continue on. It has to be the fact that just as he's beginning this big grand expose about how bad media is, the first thing he just brings up is just the same regurgitated opinions of what people said back in 2016. Like, I can't really say that I really fucked with Teen Titans Go, nor the new Powerpuff Girls. Hell, I can't even recall really watching that show at all. It's out of like random Twitter posts and all. But I have to say, the way that how he just regurgitates information or just old opinions as opposed to just, I don't know, actually coming off of a strong hook is honestly pretty funny. Not only that, but it's kind of odd how he throws Rise of the TMNT under the bus when that is probably one of the better reboots to come out in recent times, which just got unfair treatment due to the network. But of course, let us continue.
No one really respects reboots as an inherent property, especially in the manner that they're handled in our modern era. It's almost a safe opinion these days to say, ooh, Hollywood unoriginal, Hollywood bad. But when you take a deeper look at it, you realize it's not just about the unoriginality. These Disney reboots do more than just rip off the original for monetary gain. No. They actively disrespect the source material while they do it. They have to warp the brand to their liking, whether it's for monetary, social, or storytelling purposes, if you really want to give them that credit. This Teen Titans Go syndrome has only gotten worse nowadays, because instead of just telling unfunny stories, modern reboots, especially in the animated realm, aim to purposely disrespect the original vision. Starting off with the fact that the original creators don't want this kind of stuff, almost ever. We've all heard of how Steven Hillenburg never really wanted a reboot of SpongeBob, but ever since his late passing, Nick has capitalized on two already, with both thankfully pulling in little to no.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the blatant misinformation starts. Because see, well, this tweet is very, and I mean very commonly brought up when it comes to the whole thing about SpongeBob spin-offs. I'm not gonna lie. While the quality of them may be rather debatable, it's not like Steven Hillenburg was necessarily against them. Hell, he actually went back on this statement because at the time of him speaking, it wasn't that he was outright against them, it was just that at the time he had no idea about what to really do with them, currently speaking. And matter of fact, he was open to other people letting people take the creative reins for the franchise. Now, whether those sequels or spin-offs or whatever the heck you want to qualify them as are good or not is honestly up to you objectively speaking, and I can't blame you for that. However, putting words in a dead person's mouth is rather disgusting and leaves a really rather poor impression on your part, if I were gonna be honest.
I feel like everything I'm saying only relates to reboots post-2010, because prior to that, most reiterations weren't like this. Most were better than the originals, and actually kept gritty tones with cool brooding art styles. Now it's just a rainbow contest to see which show is brighter than the rest. Maybe that'll keep the kiddies in their seats a little longer.
It's crazy how you could tell about how selective someone is when it comes to their arguments just based off their editing choices. Because the fact that he starts off with footage of Rise of the TMNT only to immediately cut to shows like Powerpuff Girls and Teen Titans Go that say that cartoon reboots are bad as a whole when it comes to things about their art styles being different from the past is just something I just find to be very ironic and all, honestly. But trust me guys, it gets worse from this point on.
People are funny. These modern reboots just go back to square one while ignoring all the story arcs that preceded them, with a cheap-looking animation style and much shallower characters. And they expect folks to be all on board and excited when they announce one. Listen.
Wow, it's almost like the entire point of a reboot in the first place is to start off on a relatively blank slate so the writers can then write their own story without being held back by the limitations of what the past writers did in the first place. You know, I'm going to be real here. I may not really fuck with the current shows which are showing as a background footage to be specific, but it really feels odd how you're only singling these shows out as opposed to the other ones which were actually good and managed to actually do a pretty good job when it came to them actually being able to tell their own original stories. But of course, let us continue as always.
Part of a reboot is a fan service that you inevitably have to deliver to the original fans of the old property. You can't just say you're delivering something new for the current generation while abandoning the people who made your franchise what it is by watching all those years ago. Don't ruin our childhoods for your own creative laziness.
Okay, I'm gonna be real with y'all, but I never really understood the whole angle of quote-unquote ruining someone's childhood. Because, well, sure, I could understand the whole thing about not liking a reboot in the direction it went in. That's totally valid at all. At the same time, the whole thing about ruining someone's childhood just never really made sense to me. Because 9 out of 10 times, depending on if the show was well preserved or not, or depending on rather if you have like the disc or however the hell they decided to go handle the show after it just went off air, you could still enjoy said show for what it was back in the day and still relive your childhood memories while enjoying it, while rather completely ignoring the reboot or just acknowledging that the thing just exists and most likely isn't for you in the first place. But of course, let us continue.
It just makes you ask, why? Not to mention how they unnecessarily have to, all of a sudden, change everything about the show. I mean, no one wants to talk about it, but the current bandwagon is the whole race swapping thing they'll have to do with animated characters. April O'Neil, Timmy Turner, Velma, etc.
I'm sorry, but the whole redhead replacement theory thing is just the most unserious thing of all time, especially if you're going to take into account how many times the whole thing applies with like different actors of different races and all that type of stuff. And on top of that, I just find it really crazy how he keeps trying to mention that Hazel's a race swap of Timmy, despite them being two completely different characters, and despite a Google search probably saving him a lot of the trouble.
When everything is racial, that's the only thing I can see when watching. I never saw Blade as a black character, or Cyborg or Gerald as Static Shock.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Let's rewind so we could say it again.
I never saw Blade as a black character, or Cyborg, or Gerald as Static Shock.
A lot of my favorite characters are people of various ethnicities and racial tones.
So yes, folks, you weren't just hearing things, because he indeed did take it to that level. And if I were just gonna say anything, dude, do you realize how disingenuous you sound and how kind of hypocritical you sound when you say, man, they make everything about race nowadays, when you were the one which dedicated this video about race solely? Dude, you weren't exactly subtle with it earlier throughout this video. And on top of that, do you realize how disingenuous you sound when you say the cartoon equivalent of, oh, I'm not racist, I have black friends, but then proceed to go use Uncle Ruckus as an example? Like, out of all the characters in Boondocks are just saying, oh yeah, I liked Boondocks, you decided to go use Uncle Ruckus specifically. Like, Come on, you can't even try to play devil's advocate because the show makes it so blatantly obvious that he's an Uncle Tom, if
The
anything.
black female Timmy Turner is clearly just a cheap attempt to reboot this property without any other significant pitches for change. I mean, for the diversity folks, there must be a point where this hurts the cause more than it helps it. And this video isn't just about the new race swapping phenomenon, but it's an extremely prevalent symptom of a larger issue, which ties into the lack of respect for staying faithful to the original property. Maybe Butch Hartman wants Timmy to be race and gender swapped, which is why he has absolutely no direct involvement in the creative department of the project. I find that unlikely. It's absolutely insulting to ruin a person's original vision of a character just because people want to see themselves on screen. These people are too uncreative to create their own original stories, so they need to ruin existing stuff to be able to call themselves inclusive and hip with the times. This absolutely also hinders the story and
For the millionth time, Hazel is not a race swap of Timmy, and for another thing, this show is a sequel, not a reboot. Once again, it's really crazy how a simple Google search could have done this guy wonders when it came to this video, but you know, here we are.
episode quality, as the main selling point here is the obvious element that's right in front of us, but no one's allowed to acknowledge it for some reason. I mean, watch a single episode of Rise, A New Wish, Patrick Star, or Camp Coral, and you'll see that. Even those shows are unfaithful to the source material. It's not just about the race swapping issue. Being unfaithful has different forms, and the reason I focus on that issue is because it's the most prevalent at this point in time. Maybe 10 years ago, the discussion was about a completely different form of unfaithfulness. Still, some shows suffer from that. I mentioned SpongeBob, there are plenty of other examples. I just despise seeing a person's work be disrespected when they likely sacrificed like hell to turn into a reality.
The irony of bringing up the subject of unfaithfulness while at the same time being willingly ignorant and bringing up a bunch of misinformation within your video is just crazy to me in all honesty.
And some studio exec can just demand a reboot of it for ratings and completely change the original character into something just to appeal to the bandwagon. In live action, you could claim that the actor's audition and skill level determine who gets the role, and that would be fair, but it's totally different with an animated character made of pixels. Although even that's under question these days when the new Snow White or Ariel can't even sing but are preferred over tons of other actors. I don't know, am I crazy?
Yeah, that would be totally crazy if you just did the bare minimum of this one little thing which we like to call a fucking Google search.
I feel like I'm living in the Emperor's New Clothes. People just disagree with this because it's the right thing to say or whatever, but most people would probably agree with these common sense points deep down. When a character is good, race shouldn't matter, nor should the new spin you put on the character, whether it's a gimmicky change in the age, the gender, the design more broadly, or their persona and attitude in a larger sense.
Yeah, except that point doesn't actually make any sense, or throughout this video you never actually provided any example of that. Because throughout this entire video you constantly say that Hazel was nothing more than a race swap of Timmy, but never brought up her actual writing. You only brought up the fact that she was black. And then when you bring up actual original black characters, you never mention the fact that their blackness actually played a pretty important part to their stories at least once or multiple times, especially in a show like Static Shock or in Teen Titans where they have episodes about racism. So this whole point simply just contradicts the other because according to you, a character's race matters when it's convenient to get outraged or not because it's something to actually genuine or be cared about at the same time. So now that we're done with this video, all I have to say is that, wow. Like, the fact that this video managed to achieve what I previously thought was impossible with the whole being able to be an amalgamation of all the things which I think are wrong with media discussion in the modern day is just fucking wild to me. Because if you were going to ask me, oh, what do I think about media, about not media, but, you know, reboots with live action stuff and just reboots in general being mid compared to their originals, I think that could be an interesting conversation within itself. But then at the same time, you have videos like these which just really feel like they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, because it feels like a child's attempt at trying to critique something which they have a vague idea about what they're talking about, but instead of actually being able to form their own opinion, all they do is just parrot the opinions of what everyone else has said. And I say this because I'm someone which is pretty guilty of doing this myself as a commentary channel for years on end and not forming opinions on my own, as opposed to, you know, actually just parroting what other people said because it was just a convenient thing to say. I honestly feel like this video could have been a lot more better if this guy did the bare minimum of doing things like research and actually wanting to sound genuine in his own critique of the very thing which he dislikes, as opposed to just parroting whatever other YouTuber said in 2016, along with just not having these weird racist ass remarks throughout this entire video. Like, this one point which makes no sense to me is this part where he says, oh, people are afraid to speak common sense points because they're afraid of being canceled. And I'm just sitting there going like, you used Velma as an example in the background footage of TV shows, or not TV shows, or just reboots in general being bad, and I'm just sitting there going like, that was one of those cases where a show just got bombarded due to the fact that it was nothing like the original and would have been perfect for one of your key points of something being bad because it was objectively terrible, not because of race. Like, I feel like the fact that he dedicated the latter half of this video into something that was completely unrelated to something else was just so odd to me. Like, I just don't really get the logic behind it, and it honestly doesn't really make a lot of sense at the end of the day. But I'm not gonna have a whole brain aneurysm over that, because I think you guys also got some brain damage when y'all see where I'm coming from. So with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry for the really long gap between uploads, but you know, if things have been as of late. I'll catch y'all when I eventually upload again, and yeah, see y'all next time, folks. Later.